Well, hello again and welcome to this fifth posting in this informal series about the new atheism. And in this posting I want to talk a little bit about the link between religion and violence, which plays a very significant role in contemporary new atheist thinking about the nature of God, its impact on society, and so on. I want to begin by making the point that there is no doubt that empirically religion can lead to violence. But we need to qualify this immediately in two very significant ways. Number one, yes, some forms of religion can and do lead to violence, but not all. We've got to ask here, which is representative, which is typical? Very often the new atheist criticism of religion is based on presenting the mavericks and the fanatics as if they're the mainstream. Now that may satisfy new atheists, but it doesn't satisfy anybody else. And there is a very big question here about whether violence is typical of religion. And I suggest it's not. But there's a second point I think is of major importance, and that is that any religion which makes absolute claims, for example various forms of political writing, make these claims which can lead to violence. And that I think is very significant. Those of us who've looked at the history of the Soviet Union during the 20th century know that its absolute claims, which by the way were atheist, led it to really conduct violent campaigns against its religious populations. So we need, I think, to be very, very clear that there is an issue here which goes way beyond religion. And in fact, in many ways, the issue is not so much about religion as about fanaticism. In my book, Why God Won't Go Away, I look at some recent analysis of fanaticism, particularly in the writings of the sociologist Alberto Toscano. And Toscano makes the point that religion can create fanaticism, so can Enlightenment rationalism, so can politics, so can ideologies. And the point that Toscano is making is, I think, a very uncomfortable one. And that is that fanaticism arises out of any belief system which people will treat as being absolutely true, and when they see those who oppose them as being dangerous. I have to say with some sadness that as I read new atheist websites, I see a degree of fanaticism there, an intolerance of religion, sometimes masquerading as rational critique, but actually going much deeper. So I think there's a need here to see things in proper perspective. But there's also, I think, a need to realize that, for example, Christianity offers a very powerful rationale against the use of violence. And I'm referring, of course, to the figure of Jesus of Nazareth, which is of central importance to the Christian faith. Christ did violence against nobody. Christ did not authorize violence. Christ had violence done to him. See, for example, the crucifixion. But the key point here is that Christ was the object, not the agent of violence. Christ even asked for forgiveness for those who were killing him. Now that, I think, is an important point. It's one I'm afraid I don't see in new atheist accounts of this. I wish I did, because then I could persuade myself that they are being fair rather than polemical. Christians are asked to turn the other cheek, not let the sun go down on your anger. I'm sure there's some Christians who are negligent in these matters, but maybe that's because they're bad Christians, not because Christianity is bad. One, I think, example of this, which we need to bring into this discussion, is the famous, sadly, because I think it's a terrible event, the famous Amish schoolhouse killings of October 2006. A gunman broke into an Amish schoolhouse. Amish, remember, are a very conservative Protestant religious sect in North America. This gunman was crazed. His suicide note said he was filled with so much hate against God, and shot dead 5 schoolgirls. The Amish had no doubt about what they had to do. They took Jesus of Nazareth with the utmost seriousness, and he did not in any way authorize violence, but only forgiveness. And the Amish forgave the girl's killer. The point is that the cycle of violence was broken before it ever began. And the gunman's widow spoke, I think, very movingly of the window of opportunity, the healing that she and her family were able to enjoy as a result. Now, I'm sure that Christians often fail to live out these ideals. But my point to the New Atheism is those ideals are there. The main point I want to emphasize is one that is so obvious that really I don't think it needs to be restated. Or at least I didn't think it needed to be restated till I read Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Great. And its embarrassingly selective account of history just brought home to me how sometimes things that are obvious need to be said again and again. And here's the point. All ideals, whether they are religious or secular, are capable of being abused. They can become the end that justifies the means, and the means is often violence. Think, for example, of the abuse of liberty during the French Revolution. The Reign of Terror was all about using liberty, the pursuit of liberty, as an excuse to use violence against those who were seen to be on the wrong side in the revolutionary struggle. So there is here, I think, an extremely important point to be made. Fanaticism arises when ideals get out of control. It happens in religion, in politics, and dare I say it, in anti-religion as well. Let me make 2 points very briefly in closing this posting. First, the Enlightenment told us, get rid of religion and the religious motivation for violence goes, no more wars of religion. Well, okay, no more wars of religion, but plenty of wars, this time about ideologies and nationalist agendas. Much more vicious and much more destructive. Have we really moved ahead? And secondly, and I think a very important point, human beings are very good at constructing grounds for attacking each other. Religion can be one of them, but there are lots of others. Gender, economic status, sexual orientation, ethnicity, all these things can become the cause of violence. Religion's in there, but it's in there with lots of other things. Let's do something about fanaticism. But haranguing and critiquing religion isn't really the solution. We need to move on. In my final posting, we'll look at where the debate is now. What has the New Atheism to say? Where is the conversation going?